good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of SCM Talk Show. As I think we have been saying that we plan to have this talk show every fortnight on a different topic, and I think last one that we conducted was on 12th September. And all the topics that we are covering here have been chosen from the survey that we had sent to you, all of you, and then you responded what topic you would like to listen on. And accordingly, we have created, you know, these talk shows. So as Nistush said, the session is being recorded and it will be made available, I think, free on our mobile app, KnoWerX mobile app, as well as our YouTube channel, KnoWerX YouTube channel also. So right now we are putting everyone on listen only mode. So if you have any questions during the session, you can please put in the chat box, and we will take as many questions as possible till the time permits. So that is what we will do. So let me start by introducing Mr. Prasad Madiraju. So Prasad comes with over 26 years of experience across food supply chain, shipping logistics, automotive, engineering, manufacturing, IT and ITES industries. So he has extensive experience in supply chain management, from transformation, consulting, business development, pre-sales, account management, shared services, setting up, and the management, operation, and delivery of from management perspective. So like me, Prasad also is a mechanical engineer, but he's, I'm so not too far from my college. He's from BIT Mesra. I think we all know Birla Institute of Technology Mesra, Ranchi. An MBA in IT and Strategic Management from IIT Delhi. So he has multiple certifications in supply chain management. He's certified purchasing manager, CPM. He's certified in production inventory management, that is CPIM. He's also a certified supply chain professional, that is CSCP. So all these are from APIX, and the CPM is from, I think, ISM. So he has completed 2 executive leadership programs from INSEAD and IMD business schools also. Currently, now Prasad is, in Cargill's strategic sourcing and procurement leadership team based out of Bangalore. Previous to Cargill, Prasad was heading the transformation team for upstream processes of Maersk aligned businesses. Then prior to Maersk, Prasad was heading the procurement and supply chain sourcing business of Wipro. And during his stint at Maruti Suzuki, Prasad was trained as practicing value analysis and value engineering professional. So I think he started his career with L&T. So I think it's very illustrious career, I would say. Started with L&T, where he was part of the HEG, as you know, heavy engineering group that was involved in managing large turnkey projects for cement, oil, gas, chemical, and other process industries. If you have been to the L&T, so welcome, Mr. Prasad.
Thank you, Ravi. Really happy to be here, and thanks for the introduction.
It's actually our pleasure that you are here today. So let's begin our SCM talk show, and I think we will take this in a question and answer format. So since you have been so many years into procurement, and you have seen for last 26 years how the function has changed. So what have you seen that has changed in the last 26 years that you started your career, and now what procurement is?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And my view is that fundamentally procurement hasn't changed, in the sense that procurement buys for the business, for operations, for things to be manufactured, converted and sold as a product. That's what procurement does. And there's direct and indirect. So fundamentally, procurement continues doing that. What has changed in the last 20-25 years is how it is done. In terms of the frameworks that people use, in terms of the technology that people use, in terms of the levers that people adopt, that has changed. Second, what has changed is a much better alignment with the business. It's not a function which people think, array sourcing wale, so they will delay the whole thing. They'll make the process bureaucratic. It's just a part of the process. But they see procurement fundamentally different from before. In some organizations where uh, procurement is a core activity, for example, in manufacturing, and I can state my example from my Maruti days. It's a huge percentage. Over 80% of your cost of goods sold is the stuff that you buy.
Right,
So,
right.
if for Maruti, procurement is a core activity. Without that, the automotive company will not survive, will not exist, because the margins are so wafer thin in automotive and even other manufacturing industries. So you need to have the ability to leverage your size, scale, and get the best value, and that's what procurement does. So, but in other companies where you are in services industry, in other organizations,
Yeah.
in hospitality and elsewhere, maybe it's not as core. It could be a fringe activity, but over a period of time, people have realized that they need to manage cost across the entire value chain, if you will, and they see procurement as a sparring partner, as a partner who has a seat at the table, rather than somebody trying to delay the process by bringing in additional steps. So that's the fundamental change that I've seen. One, from a method perspective or the process that is followed. Second, from a technology deployment perspective, there's so many new technology tools that have got incorporated in the procurement space. And third, your alignment with the business.
So I'll take your answer forward. In terms of technology, I
Mhm.
think technology has impacted every part of our life, every business. So
Mhm.
how it has impacted procurement, IT and all the IT services and the tools that we have now, how it has impacted procurement.
It has impacted procurement in the sense that when I say procurement, procurement is not just buying. It's an entire value chain, starting from how you define your master category strategies for what you buy, to how do you execute your sourcing process, how do you onboard your suppliers, how do you go through the contract life cycle, how do you convert those contracts into catalogs or your master service agreements, and then how do you put it into your ERP systems for it to be consumed, and from there, how do you kind of pay your suppliers, and how do you do the accounting for that? That's what I call as source to pay. So procurement cannot be really seen in isolation. It needs to be seen in a broader context. So from that perspective, there are technology deployments at every part of the value stream. You have technology for how you create your strategies. You need to have a lot of analytics and insights, market intelligence, and all those things which you have to make sense of for you to create your strategies. So there's technology involved there. And now it's not that you need to read reports, but you have all these real-time information available, which can be sliced and diced the way you want, and people need to adopt those things to get the maximum value. That's one part at the highest end of the procurement activity. Then comes, how do you assess your suppliers? You need to be absolutely sure the suppliers that you're onboarding are financially sound. They have a good track record. They are not going to get insolvent in the next few quarters. You need to ensure that they have the right environment, health, safety practices, and many other things. So you need to have technology which helps you keep a real track of how companies are doing, and you need to use that. When you come to negotiations, there are different technology tools. You have e-sourcing tools, you have reverse auction tools, tendering tools, and many other things. And once you do that, then comes, how do you contract with your suppliers? How can you use digital signatures? How can you ensure that the contract that you've negotiated is actually managed through its life cycle, and you adhere to the terms and conditions that are therein, instead of that residing in somebody's desktop or in a file rack. So how do you make it real? And then comes the downstream part of procurement, making this visible to people. People need to know, because in large global companies, you have global contracts. So somebody negotiated in the US. How would somebody in India know that there is a contract that is there and that's the rate that should be applied? In say in Philippines or in Indonesia or India or somewhere else, you need to have these visibility. And then the last part of how do you get your invoices from your suppliers once the services are rendered, and how do you manage that? So there are suite of products that are available. Now the trick or the challenge is how do you integrate all of them, because there is no one tool. Right now you do have, but in a global environment, it's not easy to have one instance of one tool which manages the entire technology landscape end to end. So here comes the importance of how do you define your processes seamlessly? How do you enable them through different technologies which talk to each other? So there are integration points from sourcing to contracting to procurement to payments. There needs to be a connection between each of those tabs. So that's where technology again comes. Technology for each of those blocks and technology for integrating them. So technology is now an integral part of how procurement works. And given the global nature of most companies, it becomes even more pronounced or important.
Yeah, I can understand that because for these large MNCs, I think rolling out a solution like an ERP, probably it's a you do it phase wise, country wise. So I think you have different versions. Sometimes you have different ERP softwares also. So you it's a challenge to make it working seamlessly throughout the globe. So
Yeah.
I think this pandemic has brought new dimensions to the entire procurement, and I think big challenges for procurement. I think we had challenges on both end, on the sales end also and procurement end also. So what challenges you have faced and what you do during this pandemic,
Mhm.
to deal with your suppliers and ensure that the materials are available.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe just a disclaimer. These are my personal views, and I'm not speaking on behalf of my company. But in the business that I am right now, it's in the food supply chain. So we are in the essential commodities business. It's not truly a discretionary spend, but our business is more B2B than B2C, which means we work with establishments and large organizations. Uh, because of all these establishments like restaurants and food industries, they are not, because of COVID, they got impacted in a significant way. They had to shut down, but people
Right.
still have to eat. Now, how it's what has changed is a market has shifted from more business into consumers, more establishment to retail. Now, the kind of products that we sell to an establishment is different from the product that we sell to in retail. So overnight, a product mix changed, which means you need to ensure your entire supply chain is kind of designed for what you need to produce for retail rather than establishment. So main ingredients or main raw material remains the same, but there are variations because of the nature of end consumer. So you had to quickly uh, change your procurement cycles to adapt to the new requirements. The packaging sizes change because for establishments their packaging is different, but when you do a retail it's completely different. So you need to completely rehash your packaging supply chain and do a lot of packaging engineering to for the new product type. uh, that's a few of the things. Then the transportation to establishment, it's just one. You have a finite number of businesses that you deal with, but when it becomes retail, you suddenly it explodes. So now how do you take care of the freight and the logistics and the transportation part? You have to completely redesign the whole thing. Then comes things like production in your facilities. You need to have people coming into your office during this kind of a situation, which is quite risky. So how do you keep your employees safe? You need to have all the PPE supplies, the face masks, the thermometers, the pulse oximeters and sanitizers. There's so many things that you need, and suddenly everybody needs the same thing at the same time, and you
Right.
don't have suppliers actually geared up for that kind of volume and that kind of frequency, if you will, because you continuously need it. It's not that you need it for some time and then you do away with things. Redesign of the plant shop floors or the plant layouts you need to change. how people come in, how do you monitor them? And then there's a lot of fraud which goes on during crisis. You have suppliers who say they will supply, but they want cash upfront, and you have never tested them. And so fundamentally, when in a steady state, the organizations know they have a set of suppliers, they have logistics suppliers, things happen, and they have been verified, they have been vetted, you have reviewed the risk assessment, and now suddenly many of them have gone broke, or they are prioritizing for, say, for hospitals or for large government bodies, and they don't have capacity to supply to what you want. That's when you have new suppliers coming up which you have never tested. You don't know if their risk framework, you don't know their solvency, and they want advance payments. So you need to change your policies, you need to change how you assess them, and you need to know how much risk you are willing to take with such things. How do you test, and all those things. So it's a completely different way of kind of buying procurement. Suddenly, while you are like a partner, but now you have become the most important partner for the business, because
Right.
you are the one who's going to identify suppliers, you are the one who's going to assess them, you are the one who's going to ensure these things come at the right time. And the organizations that are able to mobilize and set this up in the fastest way are the ones who win. And that's where sourcing and procurement becomes so much more important. And at the same time, you have to protect your company. So sourcing and procurement again becomes important to bringing up these frameworks and other things, so that you're able to ensure the supply chains run, your this continuity in your supply chain.
So I've been
I know it's a
hearing.
big answer, but a
No, no,
longish
no, no.
answer.
I've been hearing a lot of challenges, on procurement, a lot of challenges, during this COVID, a lot of disruptions which are there. So I am wondering, out of this, do we have some learning, for a long-term basis? I mean, do we have anything to learn post-COVID-19, let us say maybe next year, 2021? Are there processes which are going to change in terms of risk management, in terms of supplier management, or in general, anything in the procurement space?
Yeah. See, all the things that you did to meet an urgent requirement will become standards. Case in point, the technology deployment. Now, uh, when you negotiate, generally people negotiate across the table, and then you might use or might not use the e-sourcing tools that you have. But now you cannot meet, you cannot travel, and people realize that you can actually use these technology platforms to negotiate. One, travel and expense budget has come down significantly. Second, I see a spike in the usage of these technology tools, which we are mandated now. We said going forward, we are not going back to the old way of doing.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that has become sustainable. The third is you cannot now sign on the contracts, because these courier services are not that capable right now, given the situation. We have started using things like DocuSign, which is digital signatures. Now those have become standards. How you do the risk assessment the cycle times have crashed. You are able to do things faster because you have to react faster. So you don't go back to your own lethargic ways. So these are the fundamental changes that COVID has brought about, which will be sustained going forward as well.
Yeah, I think in
And by the
every.
way, and suppliers, they tend to send a physical copy of the invoice. They send
Right.
it to the end users or the business, and not the shared services which most companies have. And then by the time it reaches the shared services, the invoice is already past due. So
Right.
now, because of that, people are going to e-invoices. They're using the network to send things faster. So everything is going digital that way.
Yes, I think this digital thing, digital supply chain, as well as digital in other space like medicine and so on, has been there, but we did not use it. We did not experiment with it. Now we are forced, and now we know how to do that. I think that will continue for sure. That will continue.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go to another segment of this talk show. Let me talk a little bit about, understand a little bit about your background, your journey. How did you land into supply chain management? Was it intentional, or was it by accident? So how did it happen?
Uh, if you ask me, or in fact, if you ask
From
anyone,
mechanical engineer, from
yeah,
mechanical engineer to
nobody would say that. their kids will say, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be the CEO of a company and all those things. Nobody would say, I want to grow up and join procurement. But the funny part is that after my engineering, I joined L&T, and then I quickly, after close to 2 years, I moved to Maruti, the automotive company. That's where, while I was, it has a 1 year long on-the-job training, which means you have to go through, you have to work as a technician, you have to learn how to produce a car. So I spent time in weld shop, in assembly, in engineering, in paint shop, in every part that go, every what do you call, area that goes into building a car. And then after a year-long training that you know exactly how to build a car, how to improve the processes, how to supervise teams, you really do it hands-on. That was how Japanese companies work. So during that phase, I also had a stint in sourcing and procurement. It used to be called vendor development at that point in time. And that's when I realized being there in the vendor development gives you a complete whole rounded view of how things happen. You have to, because everything is bought out. So that's a core function. That's what's clear in my mind. Second, I knew that when you are in the vendor development or supply chain function, you need to work closely with the suppliers. You'll understand their technologies, you'll understand their plant layouts, their incoming logistics, the outbound logistics, the supply chain, the commercial aspect, the technical aspect. I found that really exciting. And in fact, that's when I had decided that I want to be in supplier development. And because at the end of a year-long training, you are given an option where exactly would you want to go.
Okay.
And I was absolutely clear that I wanted to go in this area. So not many people think of joining procurement, but I actually thought of joining procurement at that stage.
Yeah, but I think in procurement you are more grounded. I would say, you see suppliers who are big suppliers, small suppliers who are getting developed, who are developed, all kind of things, and then you know how to connect them into the processes. So I think in that sense, quite exciting and a lot of value added process. I mean, in procurement, I would
Yeah,
see that.
absolutely.
So I mean, during your career, what were some of your aha moments? You realize that yes, this is what I achieved or done for my organization or for myself in supply chain management field. So if you can narrate some of those stories.
In terms of an aha moment, it's basically the value that you bring to table. It's real. It what you negotiate, what are the value that you bring to the organization in terms of cost reduction or cost avoidance or working capital improvement or maybe income generation at times are real. It shows in your bottom line directly. So I won't go into the theory of it. I'm sure it comes through the courses that you offer. Is that it directly goes to the bottom line, and it takes maybe 10 to 20 times more to get that kind of a margin through increased sales.
Sales.
I won't go into all that theory part, but here it is real what you negotiate because you know how much you have bought, you know how much price reduction that you got per widget, if you will, and then you multiply. You know that's the what you contributed to the bottom line. That's real. That's what excites me. Uh,
Right.
so that was one, and now I'm not truly into buying. I'm mainly designing how things happen in terms of how processes will be designed, how what should be the policies which govern that, what should be the underlying technology to enable what you design from a process perspective. So that's something that I see in the company that I work, that people actually follow the processes that I've designed, the policies apply. So that's a good feeling that you are doing something meaningful and you can actually see it. It's not vaporware. So
Right.
that's what I like. Perhaps not a aha moment, but
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, true contribution to the bottom line of the company. Yeah.
exactly.
So actually, so when did you decide to go for CPM and CSCP? And I would say why and how did you get introduced to this CPM, CSCP?
I did this courses while I was at Wipro. This was in 2004, 2003, 2004 time frame. And that's where I moved into a global role. I moved from an automotive company into more of consulting and outsourcing kind of company. So we had all global clients, and you need to talk their language. So
Yeah.
these are globally recognized courses, and the terms that you use in India are quite different from what you use globally. So one, it makes you aware of how things work and what are the terms that you use. So one, how when you speak, you come out as being more credible. You definitely have content. Without content, I think nothing matters. That's the
Absolutely.
core.
Yeah.
With this one, it gives you a structure of how supply chain works or how inventory management works. It gives you academic knowledge, which combined with your experience gives you the credibility to talk to customers or your stakeholders, if you will. And second is these are internationally recognized courses. So that gives you an additional credibility. So being in consulting and outsourcing kind of work, it gave me a tremendous uh, kind of a boost, if you will. So
So do you
that
have also any direct benefit and I mean indirect benefit you talked about, but do you have a direct benefit out of CPIM and CSCP? Usually
yeah,
people talk about career growth and better pays and so on and so forth.
of course, it adds to your resume. It increases your value, your market value. What is it that people are willing to pay? That definitely goes up. Second is once you are in the job, it gives you more credibility. You are able to do your job better. So obviously, if you do your job better, the kind of solutions that you create for your customers or your stakeholders is far more refined because education always helps. It gives you a structure. It's not that it's any rocket science. It gives
Yeah.
you a framework. It gives you a structure of thinking. It
Yeah.
gives you a better perspective. It gives you a broader perspective. That helps you in your job. If you are in consulting or if you are into pre-sales kind of work, you need to create solutions that you need to pitch to your customers. So if you have a good thought process, which these courses give, will help you do your job better. So obviously you have a better career path.
So let's say if you so let me ask you this question that if you have to hire people, let's say in supply chain or in procurement, in two different types of industries, consulting versus the real manufacturing.
Mhm.
What would you look for would you look for different skills in both industries, and what kind of skills you would look for in procurement or other supply chain management functions?
I think one thing that's very important is attitude. Uh, that's at the top, I would say. Then comes your knowledge, your real experience, which is super important. And the third is your ability to see things in simple terms and able to tell that story in simple terms. Because at the end of the day, when you grow through in your career, you will be always dealing with people who don't have time. And if you're not able to articulate, if you're not able to explain the problem statement and your solutions and your recommendations in simple terms, which they will understand, you lost that opportunity. And to be able to explain something in simple terms, you really need to understand.
Yeah.
You need to have your foundation really strong. You should have the ability to see the big picture and quickly zoom into the area that you want to focus on. And that requires experience, education, and a very good attitude. And in every organization, there'll always be challenging situations. And the people who are able to come out with solutions rather than saying, this is a problem and I need your help, it's always better for some. I would pick up a person who would come with solutions, even if it is half baked, even if it is not the best solution, but a person with a solutioning bent of mind who wants to solve, who has the right attitude. That's what matters. And those are the kind of people, whether it's be it manufacturing or consulting, these are the foundational traits that I would expect, and that's what people will look for. Uh, and then your ability to tell the story, your ability to explain, that's more important. You might rattle out jargon, you can rattle out many things, but if you are not making sense, if you are not able to explain your concepts in simple terms, uh, it's people really get can see through you that you don't know.
Absolutely. So, if let's say, if I ask you, you have been so senior and such a lot of experience. Do you have any tips for our listeners, in terms of career growth? How can they grow their career faster? How can they be more successful? So if you have any suggestions or if you have any tips.
Yeah, I think first there's no alternative to hard work. So there's no easy path. I think let's you. A few people might be lucky. You can be lucky only for some time, but hard work is something which is super important. It might sound very idealistic, but let me tell you, it's not. It's a fact. No matter how smart you are, how intelligent you are, it will take you only to a certain point. But hard work is extremely important. Second is be genuine, be authentic in what you do because authenticity cannot be faked. It can be seen on your face. So you can't fake it. So it's better to be genuine and authentic in whatever you do. Third is when you're in an organization, it's the ability to map the big picture.
Hmm.
You might be in a certain function, but don't get into that small world of yours and be happy there. You should always map how the organization looks like. You should know how what the organizational structure is, who does what, who are the people that you need to talk to get certain things done. Because at least in my where I sit, I need to deal with. It's a pretty large organization. It's around $120 billion, and it's around across 70 countries. And in my job, we design things for the organization across the entire world. And you need to know how the organization is structured. So you have to start from the top. You need to know how the different businesses, enterprises are structured, how are the functions that support. You need to have that mental view. In fact, you should have the ability to actually draw your organization on a piece of paper or maybe OneNote for the young folks here. You need to absolutely map the organization. You should know who does what. And then when you are doing a solution or you are getting into a meeting with a specific task, you should be able to see who all need to be involved. You should have the right set of people. You should align with the right set of people. You should be open to talking to anyone. So sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. One important thing is never ever have preconceived notions. It's always better to go ahead, ask, clear your doubts, reach out to people who might even intimidate you. But it's always important to go and ask and clarify your doubts. That really helps you in creating your solution or do your job. So map your organization. Don't feel shy or don't have any preconceived notion that they might not like or they don't have time. Just try. What's the worst that will happen? They'll say, no, I don't have time. But at least you tried. And,
Yeah.
and believe me, it'll be a rarity that they will say they don't have time. They'll talk to you. And people
Yeah.
really appreciate that. So that increases your visibility in the organization. It teaches you a lot and then you are able to map the entire organization. So when you have you're solving a problem, at the end of the day, we are all problem solvers. If you're solving a problem, so you need to have the right set of people at the table. So if you know the organization, you know who all need to be involved, knowing who all are the stakeholders in that problem. So that would be my tip. I know it's kind
Yeah.
of a bit
Yeah.
scattered. That's
No,
the
no, no.
way
I
I.
mean, absolutely. Because, I have seen people during my career, I have seen people who are very, very hardworking. They may not have been so intelligent, not been so educated, but they've been very successful, So,
Absolutely.
so sometimes, the hard work is more important than your education, than your knowledge and intelligence. So that's what I also gather, the same thing. And I think, when you talk about the broad thinking, the design, the whole organization, I'm not sure if the consulting has helped you also. At least it's helped me. When you get into
Mhm.
consulting, I mean, you're forced to, see a very
Yeah.
big picture and, answer queries of your customers, in every respect.
Yeah.
So that has really helped me, that's really helped me.
Yeah, one thing I would add, like while the big picture is important, you also need to go into the depth. It can't be
Yeah,
a superficial thing.
right.
So you should be able to go to the depth of your core domain.
Yeah.
Uh, and also you need to have the ability to go deep and then come back to the surface. Because if you keep operating at a very deep level, you'll again lose the audience or the
Right.
stakeholders. So you should have the ability to juggle between a big picture and getting into the weeds.
Right. And I think the one thing you talked about problem solving skills, I think that also consulting somehow reinforces again and again. right? It forces you to give a solution to the client, quickly, without having a prior knowledge. So to just do some research and find out something, and
Yeah.
quickly give a solution. I think so. That's another skill that consulting gives you.
Yeah.
Excellent. So very good. So I think we will go to this question answer sessions. I think some people have questions, so I think we'll take those questions. So Anistush, if you have collected some questions, I think we can start.
Yeah, all right. I can we can do that. We have got some interesting questions. Very wonderful insights about the industry and about the career from Mr. Prasad. So, really, thank you very much for that. And we have some interesting questions. The first question which I'm going to ask you, sir, is from Mr. Hirok Chakraborty. So this question, I think so, is a very basic dilemma in the procurement industry or the purchase industry or the sourcing industry. So that's what the question is. What is the exactly difference between sourcing and procurement? Generally companies mix the two terminologies. I would say even purchasing. So how would you differentiate these three different terms: sourcing, procurement, and purchasing?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and that's been one dilemma forever, I would say. It hasn't changed in the last 20, 30 years, I would suspect. But the way I would like to differentiate between sourcing and procurement is the rigor and the strategic intent. So, and I could be wrong, but the way we define in our organization is sourcing is more strategic. You have to create the master category strategy. How will you deal with this spend as a category? And you'll come out with a strategy in terms of I would not be negotiating at a chair and a table level, but I would negotiate at the office furniture level. I'll not be buying small widgets, but I'll buy the entire system. Those are the strategies that you need to create. And then how does the market look like? How am I going to scan the market, and what are the different levers? What are the drivers for that kind of a category? So those are the strategic things which you do for a category strategy. Then comes how are you going to negotiate? What kind of suppliers are you going to bring in? How are you going to define your requirement? How are you going to negotiate with your suppliers? How are you going to contract? What is the deal structure that you're going to go with? And what are the financial structures that you're going to create? That is very strategic. That requires a lot of experience and competency as well. And that's what we call sourcing. And then it's not only those big things, but it's a wide spectrum. You can source small things as well. By value, you can source a multi-million dollar thing, or you can also source a simple widget. It is still sourcing. That's what is considered sourcing, which is strategies, negotiations, sourcing strategies, contracting. That's what is called as sourcing. Procurement is once you have a contract, how do you activate it? How do you buy off that contract? Uh, and typically spot buys and transactional procurement, that's what is considered procurement, where you send a purchase order, or maybe you do a quick negotiation if you have a master categories, if you have a master contract, you can still negotiate. Doing those kind of things, sending a requisition, sending a purchase order, getting confirmation, getting stuff that you want, that's all procurement. It's a bit transactional in nature. That's how I would segregate sourcing and procurement. But then you have a chief procurement officer who's the head of the whole thing. So it can be quite ironic, I would say. So there's no right or wrong, but that's the way. If you ask me, I would kind of put it into two buckets. And the third thing you asked was, I think, purchasing. Again, purchasing is more, but it's a more overarching thing. What what the sourcing and procurement organizations do is they purchase on behalf of the organization. That's they buy. They are the shoppers of the organization. So again, you can find these definitions if you do Google. You can get it in Wikipedia, but it's there's no right or wrong. But if you ask me, this is the way I would put it.
All right, all right. Thank you so much. I think that clears little bit of doubt among the professionals, and they now understand at least what is the difference between sourcing, and the procurement as such. So thank you so much. The next question is from Mr. Debyendu. So he says that you spoke about the change behaviors during the COVID period. So his question was related to that. So are these change behaviors short term till COVID stands, or what are the things that are going to prevail even after the pandemic?
I think I covered a bit during my chat with Ravi. Is certain things will be permanent, which is things like use of technology. Now, people, once you get used to it, there's no going back. So, if you're used to a smartphone and they'll tell you go to a 2G phone, you'll not be able to go back. It's a
Sure.
permanent state because now you know it works. It's faster. It has better audit trail. It's transparent. It has the visibility. People will use those tools. So the e-sourcing tools, no going back. The contracting, the digital contracting, the digital signatures, how things move within the organization, how you utilize those contracts. I don't think you'll be going back to paper contracts or even Word documents or PDFs. I think people won't be going back on that. And then all the other things that I said, people will continue to be agile. They'll be faster. They'll be quicker. I don't think there's anything that would change. It's just that the product mix might change, the kind of products that you sell might change, but the way of working will remain even post COVID. And also, one thing I would like to add is all of us are working from home now. At least most of majority of us. Uh, I think we will have the option of working from home going forward as well. Instead of going 5 days a week, you might go just 2 or 3 days a week, only when you need. The office capacity will be reduced because you don't need 100% capacity for 100% people. You can actually make do with, say, 50 or 60%. And some companies have even declared that they would want to continue working from forever. So those are the permanent changes. There might be some, the, maybe certain things. Obviously, when the pressure goes, people tend to relax a bit more. Uh, Other than that, I think these are fundamental changes that are happening in the industry today.
Yeah, I think, I would also add that, earlier we did not even think that, working from home is possible and we can do a lot of things that we do from our offices. But now we've been forced to do that, and I think we'll continue to do that now, at least to
Yeah,
some population, not the whole. But
absolutely.
yeah,
Honestly, I don't believe that working from home is a good thing forever. We are social beings. We need to interact. Because I remember when pre-COVID, we used to have these whiteboarding sessions. People come and then you socialize. You take a tea break or a coffee break. People go down for smoking. That social interaction is important. That we are humans at the end of the day. The only difference is you don't need to do that every day. You can do it maybe twice a week. And because obviously, I'm sure at least folks in Bombay must be happy that they don't need to travel 2 hours, be on the road one way
yeah,
many times, and no certainty. So from that perspective, there are good things, there are bad things as well. And we have seen personally in our lives, kids now have online classes. They use Microsoft Teams, Zoom meetings, and all these things. So they are already working like organizations without they're still being students. So, but again, I don't want this to be a new normal. I will say this is a new abnormal. We should go back to our old lives. We should be meeting people. We should be socializing because it's how humans are structured, how we are wired. And second, if we all stay at home, there'll be a lot of businesses that'll close down because the service industry, they depend on people coming out, going out, eating, the malls. There's so many people. The economy works because we spend. If we all sit at home, you're basically killing a huge section of the industry. Yep. Sorry, I
Sure.
digressed a bit.
Sure. Absolutely. So I'll take the next question. There's one more question from Subodh, but I will take that afterwards. I'll first take the question from Mr. Ram Nalavde. So he says, what is required to create sustainable supplier who can grow with organization?
Sustainable supplier would be, it's more of a partnership that companies need to have with their suppliers. And when you say sustainable, it's how you collaborate with your supplier for what you want in terms of product design, in terms of the engineering that goes behind it, in terms of, it's not a transactional relationship that I want this, tell me how much are you going to give it to me for, and year on year I beat you down on price. That's not a sustainable relationship between a supplier and an organization. It needs to be a long-term partnership where you have a certain amount of trust. You collaborate with the supplier. There's nothing like a cost reduction. It's how you reduce the overall. It's not a price reduction. It's a cost reduction. Sorry, my bad. So price is cost is the inputs plus the margin and the overheads is the price. So if you reduce the price, you should at the same time ensure that the cost goes down, because obviously the supplier will be a sustainable supplier if they are making sufficient profits to plow it back into design, into improvements and other things. A sustainable supplier is one who works with the organization together to bring the overall cost, bring about innovation, add more value, come out with better products. If you do all that, you would be considered a sustainable partner. So I won't go into sustainability in a different way. There are multiple ways to look at sustainability, but this is how I would say sustainable growth with the organization. I'm not sure,
Great.
Ram, if I answered your question, but
I'm sure you did. Right. So the next question is from Mr. Ram Prasad. He says that how do you encourage both organizations and procurement community to change their industries to share and implement best practices, since many people continue in their respective industries mostly due to organizations giving preference to candidates from same or similar industries. So basically, the question says, how do you encourage people to change their field from, and share best practices in procurement field as such?
okay, let me split it into two parts. One is what is it that you would do with your career, and the second part is what can the organizations do for employees within the organization. From you as an individual, uh, at least I can speak for myself. I have been a risk taker. I'm fundamentally a risk taker, so I don't fear changing my lines or function or what I do. So I was in heavy engineering. I moved to automotive, to IT consulting and outsourcing, to shipping, and away from procurement. I was in the commercial part in Maersk Line, which is the world's largest container shipping company. Then I have moved into the food business. So I never feared jumping industries. So, and the reason why they hired me is not that they were looking for somebody from outside the industry. They like my thought process. So it's about how you are able to sell yourself and how are you able to sell your experience, which is relevant to the companies that are looking for people. They look for relevance. They don't look for an exact fit. If you apply for a job, have you done sourcing for DG sets, or have you done sourcing for professional services? They will not look at specifically at that. They look at a more fungible, more broad-based competency and capabilities. So if you are able to build those capabilities, which can be used in different kind of areas, then you can actually sell yourself to the company and get a job in a completely different industry. So you can move from say retail to telecom to something else. It'll be easy for you because you have a fungible skill set. Now, talking about the organizations. So organizations, many companies, maybe not all, have this concept of rotating people through different functions. So how do you move from manufacturing to procurement to HR to finance or something else? So those depend on the company policies and how organizations work. But if you have that opportunity, I would strongly urge, get your experience. You should always come back to your core, but you should move around, gather experience, and then come back to what your strength is. Because in other areas, you can at best be a mediocre, but your core is always your core. So you should always come back to your core. But going through different areas gives you a broader perspective and improves you as an individual.
Got it. Thank you so much. So I think that actually answers a part of a question which was from Mr. Subodh Pandey. So he said that I believe SCM experience could be the next generation CEO. What is your thought on this? So I think part of that you have covered. You have to keep rotating, take experience. But anything that you would like to add on that?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know what is the CEO material, but having a broad perspective of things, and you need to be financially strong when you go to that level. So you need to absolutely have a stint in finance for sure, and you need to know your product. You need to know your customer. So if you move through different parts of the organization, you have got the holistic view because a CEO is at the top, and he needs to have a view across every function from R&D to logistics to planning to sourcing and procurement, manufacturing, logistics, warehouse, and the commercial. How do you deal with supplier, with your customer? Sorry. So you have to have a holistic view. So if you actually move through different functions as part of your career, that will give you a holistic view. And obviously, that will make you a good candidate for CEO. But there are other parameters as well, which I wouldn't know.
Sure. So we're going to take last two questions. This one is for you, Mr. Prasad sir. The next one is for you, actually, Ravindra sir. So let me take this one, which is for you, Prasad sir. This again from Mr. Ram Lavde. So he says how lean supply chain is putting up challenge on purchasing. So we are sure lean supply chain is always talked about in the benefit of the supply chain for surely it can become a problem for purchasing. So how do you see it is putting up challenges for purchasing?
Lean supply chain is basically a supply chain that is extremely responsive, works on very low inventory, and with quick turn times because the product life cycles are shrinking. So what you sell in the market keeps changing very frequently. So the supply chains have to adapt themselves with the changing reality, which is the customer. It's always the customer who decides what they want and what they're willing to buy, not decide what they want, but what are they willing to pay for your products. And that goes all the way back to how you run your supply chain, how responsive are you, and if and how are you able to do just in time? How are you able to create products which will reduce your inventory levels? How do you standardize? How do you do value engineering? And how do you go for a modular way of working and so forth? So that's what will help you build a lean supply chain. And you need to have the capability and the competency to understand that and build and develop suppliers who can support you in that journey. So it goes back to how you negotiate, how do you onboard, how do you identify and work with your supply base, who can help you with your lean supply chain. So if you go with a supplier who is rigid, who just does one thing with no flexibility, obviously is a wrong supplier for being a part of the lean supply chain. So as a sourcing professional, you should have the ability to identify such suppliers and work and partner and collaborate with them and treat them as your extended organization. That's what goes to the previous question that somebody asked me about the sustainable thing. How do you build that partnership and treat them as partners than suppliers, you versus me? You are servicing me, that kind of an attitude. So you should truly believe in a partnership for lean supply chain as well.
Got it. I think that very well answers the question of Mr. Ram Nalavde. So the next question, which is the last question for the day, I would ask Mr. Ravindra to please take it up and answer that. Sure, sir. Prasad, sir, you can add on as you like. So Mr. Debendra Rajguru says, how do you upgrade in this era of digitization, maybe specific to various functions like SCM? So how do you upgrade yourself?
So I think very very relevant question, and I think the Apex organization in supply chain management, Apex itself, debated on that. You know, what do we do and how do we do it? Because as you know, that the supply chain is highly very very big way getting impacted by IT, digitization, and so on. I mean, not only supply chain, of course, all fields, but supply chain, when we talk about a lot of automation, a lot of autonomous things, and a lot of things are coming. And I think for even for an organization like AP, it was difficult to handle. So they start, doing collaboration. That is how ASCM is born. Now, as far as so that is as far as APIX and ASCM is concerned. As far as we are concerned, we know a lot of things are changing. Okay, and how do we know that is from social media, from news, from SCM articles that we keep getting, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of noise on the market about, let's say, IoTs or 3D printing or AI, ML. Yeah, there's a lot of noise. Okay, so what we need to do, we need to at least have some basic understanding of all. Okay, I'm not saying that we need to be an expert. So when we say digital supply chain, let's not start thinking that I'm going to be a programmer. I'm not going to be a programmer. I'm going to be a user, but I need to understand how the technology works, so that I can exploit it. So that's very, very fundamental. And we should not lose sight of the basic supply chain management skills. So no matter what happens in the digital world, no matter how much it is developed and what are the advances, the basic fundamental supply chain concepts, practices still remain. Okay, those are not going to go away. So that I think we have to anchor on and then keep on building on to anything and everything that comes. We at least have some sort of a knowledge. Either we can, I mean, today it's not very difficult. You can go onto the web and you can search for information. You will get a lot of it. Okay, but you have to put effort. You have to take initiative. And if you want to get into a little bit more advanced, let's say, okay, then probably you have to enroll in some sort of a course which offers some course on AI or ML. But you don't have to do coding. I mean, you don't have to get into coding at all. But you have to understand the power of technologies. That is what I would say. There's a lot of opportunity. And I think, very recently, Apex built some components of digital supply chain, the score model. So you can look at the digital extension of the score, and that probably will give you idea what components that we need to understand as far as supply chain management is concerned. So did I answer the question?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that was a pretty fair answer considering the current situation. Is there anything you would like to add on that, Mr. Prasad?
No, I think Ravi covered it quite well. Only I would say keep yourself relevant and keep yourself up to date with what's happening in the world in the supply chain space.
So I think that's the golden line to pick up from the session. Keep yourself relevant. I think that's quite important in today's scenario. All right, so this we have come to the end of the question answer also. So thank you very much, Prasad sir, for joining in, for your taking out valuable time and giving us such a wonderful insight on the procurement industry of supply chain. Thank you, Ravi sir, for hosting this show. It was as always, we keep learning. It was really fun and interactive with the kind of examples you took it up with Prasad sir and the interactions. We all thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you so much. Uh, for the audience, if you want to interact with the trainers, with the speakers, sorry, I have posted the LinkedIn address of both the speakers. You can connect with them and you can ask your questions if you would like to. Thank you everyone for joining in the show. The sixth episode of SCM Talk Show will take place on 10th of October, and the topic for that is warehouse automation. So I'm sure a lot of people who are looking into the logistics and the warehouse department and the industry right now would be looking forward to hear from the expert in this field. So do join us there. Keep following us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube for the recorded sessions and for updates regarding upcoming talk shows or the events. You can also download our app and you can play the National SCM Trivia. So we put in quiz every Tuesday and Friday on the app where you can answer and you can take prizes at the end of the month and at the end of the year. If there is any topic that you want to recommend to us, please write to us on the email address which is mentioned in the chat box, or you can connect with us on the number mentioned in the chat box again. So thank you everyone for joining in. Have a wonderful weekend and see you again on 10th October at 4 p.m. on the same link address. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.